Right?
We got another 2 minutes, so and we'll probably give people another like minute or two just to slide back in because there's a little break. So
of course. I'm always, I've been in North America since 1992, and I still have an accent, which doesn't bother me. I'm proud of it. Oh, not proud, but it doesn't bother me. And I still can arrive to things on time. I did today, so that's the important things I do. But I'm always arriving 2 or 3 minutes late.
there you go.
It's kind of,
yeah. My in-laws have a tendency, or had a tendency to come about 30 minutes early to everything.
Well, right, and that's the problem. Is I rationalize everything, and I say, actually, if you go by the deviation from the scheduled time, I am closer than you. See, you've been waiting for 20 minutes already because you were 20 minutes early. So now I'm 2 minutes early, 2 minutes late, and it feels like you've been waiting for half an hour. But of those, only like, anyhow,
Absolutely.
that doesn't get me very far, rightly so, because it should.
Fair enough.
Anyhow. So
as a matter of fact, I just need to step out for 1 second. I will be right back.
Yep.
Diego, thanks so much for doing this talk for us.
I was going to say, this is Eric. This is our director here. So.
Hi, Eric.
And Diego.
No, it's a pleasure. I enjoyed it when Marta invited me in the past at Villanova. So thanks for inviting me.
Yes, she has been really enthusiastic about your presentation. So I'm really excited to hear it today. Looking forward to it.
Okay, now the pressure's on.
Maybe just a little. No.
No, I know.
So we've been running this program for, this is the second day, and it's a mixture of sort of professional development activities and science activities for our trainees. So
yeah, I saw the list. So is it mostly, what is it, postdoc, graduate students, undergraduates?
All of the above. Yeah, I think probably grad students is the largest cohort, but also
and of which, and they're coming from which departments in general?
Mostly from chemistry departments. There are a few earth and environmental science folks, and I think maybe some engineers. Not quite sure, but yeah, mostly chemistry departments.
Very good.
Mm-hmm.
So you are located in the chemistry department?
That's right. Yeah, and this NSF center that I'm.
Yeah, I look at the website, but I just didn't know I didn't remember where you were located.
So this is out of the chemistry department, and that's where my appointment is. But as one of our speakers said yesterday, the problems that we're working on are sort of big tent problems that span a number of different disciplines. So it's interesting the kind of range of speakers that we have, and that's one of the points, is that we want to have students have educational experiences and training experience that are outside of their normal PhD program experiences, so that they can become more effective scientists.
Sounds like a plan.
Yeah.
Will be done by the end of today. They'll be ready.
Yeah.
For certain.
Okay.
Well, I don't want to take too much more time out of your talk time, and then people kind of filter in and out as needed. So I'd like to go ahead and introduce you, if that's all right.
Yep.
So we have with us today Dr. Diego Fernandez-Duque, who grew up in Buenos Aires, Argentina. After getting his medical doctor degree there, he moved to the University of Oregon in Eugene, where he worked with Mike Posner on issues of attention and executive function. He also did research on change blindness with Ian Thornton and on metaphors of attention with philosopher Mark Johnson. He moved to Toronto for his postdoc under the supervision of Sandy Black, a cognitive neurologist at the Rotman Research Institute and Sunnybrook Hospital, doing research on attention and executive function in Alzheimer's disease. He has also studied frontotemporal dementia, a disease characterized by impaired social skills and denial of deficit. He currently works at Villanova University, where he pursues research on judgment and decision-making and on social cognition. And I'm absolutely delighted to have you here. Diego is someone who we've worked with on a number of things over the past few years, and he's just a delightful person. So I'm just very excited to have you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so we're gonna get started. Let me see if I have sharing. And that. Okay. Okay, and what I'm hoping to do today is to give you a few of the highlights of the field of judgment and decision making, which I must say is very well represented at Penn and at Wharton. And I selected some of the items that I think might resonate with some of your interest. Broadly defined, I think, as how can we avoid disaster with global warming and leave a better place for our future generations? I think that's the task for the next 50 minutes. Are you ready? But not every example is going to come from global warming. Actually, many are not. But hopefully you will see some of the themes or lessons from it. And I don't know you, but I tend to doze when the lecturing goes for more than 5 minutes. So I'm going to try to break it into some activities. But of course, for that, I need you engaged. And that means also having your camera on, especially when you're divided in groups. And I'm going to try to keep the activities relatively short, and we're going to go back and forth, and hopefully that will be smooth enough. I think a year and a half of pandemic has taught us, most of us, how to transition from the breakout rooms to the main room. So I want to start with this, and I'll say that for many of the activities, sometimes you might have encountered this already and know the answer. If that's the case, then that's the one instance in which I would ask you not to blur the answers to the rest of your teammates. Short of that, please participate. And so let's start with this somewhat interesting finding on differences in organ donation volunteers across countries. And you probably know, organ donation, every year there are patients who are dying literally because they don't have the organs for a transplant. So it's a serious problem. And you can see here some huge differences in how willing citizens community are in signing for donating their organs after they die. With France at almost 100% and United Kingdom only 17. And so what I want to first ask you is, what do you think might explain this? And you're going to have about 2 minutes, let's say, and you'll talk with your group, and also if you feel Google Sheet that I created, and write some of the things that you might that you might want to say.
Diego, do you mind repeating that? Because you broke up a little bit.
Sorry for that. So I was saying that when you are in the groups, can you hear me or not really?
Yeah, well, we missed the part about what the groups were and what we were doing prior to that.
Okay, so sorry for that. In what I was saying,
just go back to the assignment.
Can you guys see the Google Sheet there, Martha? Okay.
Yes.
So basically, the Google Sheet helps you to put in writing some of the thoughts that you might have, but don't sweat it too much. It's just something to kind of keep us going, so to speak. So with that in mind, then let me ask you, what do you think would account for this difference in organ donation between France and United Kingdom? And I'm going to have you divided in two groups. If your birthday is between January 1st and June 30th, you're going to be in group one. If you are on the second half of the year, your birthday, then you're going to be on group two. And so when you go to the Google Sheet, make sure to go to the first half, people who have their birthday in the first half, or people who have the birthday in the second half, okay? Okay, so let's get you into your breakout rooms.
Great. So you should be able to choose which one you want to go into. So go into breakout room 1 if your birthday is in the first half of the year. And if you are second half, please go in the second one. Getting there. I don't think this is a fairly new feature to be able to self-select. So I think people are still trying to find the buttons. So first half of the year, you're in room 1, second half of the year, birthday, room 2.
Where is the button?
So if you go down to the bottom, it has like 4 squares that says breakout rooms. You should have the ability to just, it has a little blue thing that says join, and you should be able to pick which room you want to be in.
When you hover over the number, okay.
You might not have it if you did an update. We can put you, so when was your birthday, Maxon?
Max, you still with us? Maybe.
And Sam, are you there, Sam?
Sam, I saw you briefly. Oh, he's gone.
Okay. Okay, and you can go anywhere. You can say there you're your own woman. So
absolutely, yeah. Hold on. Well, you know what I'm gonna do real quick is I'm gonna make you a co-host, because that will give you a little bit more control as well over what's going on. So that will be nice. Cool. All right, I'll go see what the first group is up to. They had some questions. It mutes for some reason every time I come back to the main room. I don't know why. It's some weird setting that I haven't figured out how to turn off yet.
okay, I think I'm gonna bring them back.
I'm not sure they had quite enough time to look at it yet, but you're welcome to if you'd like, if you need to.
Yeah, well, they'll have 50 more seconds. I click before you finish that sentence.
Yeah. You're like, too bad. It's so sad. You cracked me up.
Okay, so I'm not going to ask you to repeat the things that you that you discussed. I know that was a brief period, but I can tell you, if you are like most people, and I know in many ways you are unique and special, but in other ways you are like most people, then probably the first thing that came to mind were some cultural stereotypes. Maybe you thought that the French behave of a certain way, or maybe the United Kingdom has some other things. And maybe if you wanted to get past that, because you're analytically minded, after all, you are in a chemistry PhD program, you probably went for something that has to do with the structure of the healthcare system in the two countries, or some other historical events. It turns out that the difference is not due to cultural differences, and we kind of know that because if we expand it to other countries, we see that countries that are culturally relatively similar, like Germany and Austria, they have diametrically different results. And the same would be true for Denmark and Sweden. And so it's not the cultural things. And as far as other factors, there might be there, but it turns out that the answer to this question is remarkably simple, and it has to do with what a potential donor has to do. In the UK, and I believe there are some people from the UK, so if I'm saying anything here that is wrong, please stop me and tell me that my facts are wrong. It could happen, it has happened. But my understanding is that in the UK, at least when this data was collected, it was an opt-in system where you check a box if you want to be an organ donor. And if not, then by default, you are not. Well, in France, you check the box if you do not want to be an organ donor. Otherwise, you are an organ donor. So a simple framing of the question leads to remarkably different results here. What are the take-home messages of this? I think there is like a couple that I want to emphasize. One of them is how we frame the decision does matter. The other is that we are really good at coming up with stories to explain things. That is, we humans like narratives. We like, and you know, if you watch sports, it's enjoyable, and you have experienced how there's a whole narrative of how the team, the Milwaukee Bucks, were predestined to win the NBA championship, when sometimes all that is difference between the winner and the loser is whether the last shot went on one direction or the other. And yet we find good stories, the so-called good stories, compelling. And that's going to be important, because one of the things that Marta told me is that one of the goals or the task for us in these 50 minutes is how do we reach out to the community and send our message. And I think for most of us who are evidence-based, the inclination is to present the facts, and very much go with facts. Facts is good. I'm not saying no facts. What I'm saying is that in general, people are receptive to narratives, like trial lawyers know this very well. So I think those are the two take-home messages of this study. I can tell you, some of you, if you're a postdoc or a new faculty, congratulations. You might have a retirement savings account that the university contributes to. So it's basically free money. You should sign up. In opt-in situations, you have to actually go to HR and check the box that says, I want the free money that you're offering me. In the opt-out, you would go and say, I actually don't want the free money that you're offering me. And there is, this research was done in a company that was transitioning from an opt-in system to an opt-out system in April of 1998. And before the transition, there were about 50%, half of the people were opting in for it. After the transition, 86%. So again, these are huge effects, right? You also find it on other cases. I'm gonna skip these for, because I think otherwise we'll run out of time, but I'm gonna give you these slides so you have them as background of other examples. But the next one that I wanna talk about is one that, that I think you might find interesting. I would imagine all of you have taken some amount of math in your high school and your college, given your professional background. So let's imagine two individuals. One is Adam, who is driving this kick-ass SUV from Better Call Saul, if you watch that show. And he wants to get a different car, one that instead of having a 10 mile per gallon, will run at a 20 mile per gallon. Well, some other suburban mom named Beth, wants to change her sedan, who goes at 20 miles per gallon, and decides to change it to a newer model that gets 50 miles per gallon. And so what I want to do now is want you to go into your rooms and decide with your teammates who of these two individuals will end up saving more gas. And let's put it that they will drive 10,000 miles in the year, okay? So go to the groups, again, just 2 or 3 minutes, try to get the answer, and then we'll come back.
Sam, you okay? Oh, there we go. Figured it out. I absolutely love this style of like challenging, you know, the way that people think. It's great.
When it works, it's great. When it doesn't work,
it sort of breaks you. You're like, wait, I thought I understood things. And then you're like, darn it, I didn't understand things.
It's great. Yeah, I mentioned that to the first group. I haven't had a chance to check the second group. They're not they're not used to this kind of active learning stuff. Used to sort of the old talk, right? You turn off your video, turn off your microphone, talk.
Yeah, we're gonna
This is good. This is a good thing.
So
Yep.
One of the groups already got it, so.
Perfect.
Okay, I imagine that most people are back. And I see that one of the groups got it exactly right. I didn't see the answer for the other one. But let me walk you through it quickly. And let me first say that the intuition here, the intuition, which happens to be the wrong intuition, is that the person who transitioned from 20 to 50 will be saving more. The math tells you otherwise, because what you have is that if you go from 10 to 20, you are going from spending 1,000 gallons a year for 10,000 miles to spending 500, therefore saving 500 gallons. Well, if you go from 20 to 50, you go from 500 gallons to 200 gallons, and you save only 300 gallons. This is a paper that the researchers submitted and ended up publishing, I think, in Science, possibly in Nature. But talking to one of the researchers, he was telling me that, the reviewers at the beginning were very dismissive, because it's like, this is stupid, man. This is middle school math. Which is true, by the way. My daughter was in middle school when this appeared, and it is middle school math. And everybody has done middle school math, but the vast majority of participants failed to apply it. Now, that may be an indictment on the educational system, but more general, I think it's a point that often we have intuitions, and it's hard to overcome them. And especially it's hard when one dispositionally doesn't feel to be analytical, but also when we're tired, when we're hungry, when we're sleep deprived, when we're stressed. Interestingly, not so much when it's a high stakes. You would think that high stakes would put us into, this one really matters. I'm gonna calculate it better, right? So, if you're doing your mortgage for 30 years, you want to get the math right on that one. If you're buying an ice cream, who cares? It's just pennies. It turns out that how important it is not one of the factors that modulate the likelihood that people are going to get it right. And more importantly, people get it wrong very, very often. Okay. Here there's the table. I don't think you need it, but it's there. And here's something interesting. In just a few years from the moment that the paper was published, I think 5 or 10 years later, which for bureaucracies is speed lighting, they changed the settings on the sticker that you see when you go to buy a car. So that now it appears the information of how many gallons you use per 100 miles, which is really what you want to know, right? Now, not always. Sometimes you want to know miles per gallon. So if you're in the highway and you only have a couple of gallons left, and you see that the next gas station is gonna be 100 miles from it, well, at that moment, you do want to know whether your car can sustain it or not. So it does have a role for that particular situation, but most of us, what we want to know is how many gallons per mile. Now, obviously, the next thing that you notice when you see this is that this is a fifth of the size of that number. So if we wanted to do it really, really right, we would put this number larger and the miles per gallon smaller. That would be a much better, but of course there are factors that have nothing to do with what would be the better design, and it has to do with other entrenched interests of how to present information. I should tell you that this happens also in other domains, like sunscreen. It's the same story. And again, I'm not gonna, by the way, don't Google sunscreen pretty girl, because this is not the first image that appears. Now, I don't know what that says about my Google history, but don't try that at home. Yeah, I know we are being recorded. These are jokes, people, by the way. If you're getting offended right now because you've been watching this somewhere, this is just humor. Okay, thank you. Anyhow, for sun's protection function is the same thing. So if you want to know how much damage an hour of sun will give to you, then an SPF of 10 tells you that you can stay 10 hours and get the same amount of sun damage as in 1 hour. But nobody really wants to know that, right? I mean, what I want to know is if I stay half an hour in the sun, with or without sunscreen, how much damage there is. And it's the identical situation. And I'm gonna skip some of this other than to tell you that since I have a background in medicine, I feel compelled to tell you, you should wear the sunscreen. The most important is the first. It's more important to put it more than once a day, because especially if you don't have one that is, you rinse and goes away. It's going from 1 to 2 of SPF cuts in half the number of ultraviolet light that goes into your skin. While going from 1 to 30 gives you 97% protection. Going from 1 to 60 gives you 98% protection. So, of course, if you are trying to sell something that is, and sell it more expensive because it has 150 SPF, that is a different motive. But from a public health point of view, it really doesn't make much sense to go past 30, certainly past 60. And actually, I believe that the European Union regulators, communists, have prevented or forbidden companies from advertising beyond a certain number of the SPF. And there you have basically the curve to show you. Now, I hope, and maybe I'll leave you with this as a optional homework, is that as you are hearing me, I'm hoping that examples from your discipline would pop in your mind. They certainly didn't pop in my mind, because what do I know about chemistry, right? But if they do, if you send them back to me, that'll be great, because then, you know, it takes a community. Okay, let me stop here and open it for discussion or questions there might be. I should have said before, if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them and to make it conversational. I'm going to give you the opportunity now, and then we'll switch to another topic. Okay, that's okay also. It's okay not to have questions. But if you do, please don't hesitate to stop me, okay? I'm not very good at seeing the chat as I'm talking, so just unmute yourself and shout. Here is another one. I sometimes have this conversation with my wife, who is a saint, and I ask her, you know, what do you think is more dangerous? To have a gun in the house when you have a toddler, or to have a swimming pool? She hates it when I do this, right? Because we're bleeding heart liberals. We don't own a gun. I'm kind of scared of guns. Like, I don't want a gun in my head, but pool, we love the pool. I mean, who doesn't like the pool? I don't know the statistics, but I suspected that having a toddler and a pool is a more dangerous combination than having a, at least securely stored gun and a toddler. I don't know that, so don't quote me on those numbers. But the point is not that. The point is that it's a pool. How can that hurt you, right? And this brings us to the affect heuristic. Heuristics are shortcuts, mental shortcuts that we use all the time to make decisions and to make judgments. So, for example, if I ask you how many people, how many Americans travel to Europe, what the percentage of Americans that have traveled to Europe, you're probably going to think, oh, well, Michael went, and also all my family has gone. You know, most of us, we come from we are surrounded by people from upper middle class professionals who go a lot. And so you think, well, I can think a lot of them. And then you're going to end up overestimating how many people go to Europe, because you can think of a lot of cases. That is a heuristic that's called the availability heuristic. The cases that come to mind quickly are the ones that quickly and in abundance, you use that as a proxy to estimate the probabilities. But there are other heuristics too. And this one that I'm talking about today, or at this moment, is affect heuristic. And this has to do with feelings. Feelings. Okay, I was gonna sing, but I can't sing, so I'm not gonna even try it. Let's instead ask a more relevant question: how beneficial is nuclear power? And for those of us who are old, or at least old enough, there was a time where nuclear power was like evil, like, oh, nuclear, no, nuclear is like awful. And you can ask, so two questions. One is how beneficial nuclear powers are, and the other one is how much risk is posed by nuclear power. And you might think, well, these are kind of the same question, but they're not. They're actually quite different questions. So, you know, you are asked one question here, which is, what do you think? And then you answer something else, which is, how do you feel about it? And here's where the guns and the swimming pool come to mind, right? So let me tell you what the researchers did. This was work done by Paul Slovic at the University of Oregon. He was there when I was a graduate student, and I was ignorant enough to know that he was there and that he was a great guy and one of the most influential researchers in judgment and decision making. So I guess if there's a moral of the story there is look around who else outside of your narrow area of research is at Penn or in Philadelphia that might be doing something interesting. You know, that's a word of wisdom, doesn't necessarily have to do with my talk, but what the heck, I'm talking so I can do whatever I want. Anyhow, what Paul Slovic did is he gave participants a variety of items: nuclear plants, pesticides, antidepressant medication, vitamin supplements, you can imagine vaccines, and asked them to these two questions: how beneficial it is and how much risk it poses. So take something like pesticides. So pesticides, you could say, well, they're very beneficial. They increase the amount of yield that you might have on the grains that you're cultivating. But they might also have some risk associated with it, right? And in reality, usually risk and benefit are positively correlated, because we tended to not allow things that are risky and don't have any benefit for society. But the perception is instead one of a negative correlation, where people think that things that are risky are not beneficial. And interestingly, you can change it. So this is correlational, so you don't know exactly. But the idea here is people are just using their feelings, or not just using, people are using how they feel. I don't like this thing. That's what makes it the affect, right? So I don't like this thing. And so this thing is not going to be helpful, and this thing is going to be risky. If you then go and you bring participants and you explain all the benefits of nuclear power, like, you know, it could provide energy without increasing global warming, then all of a sudden, the perceived risks of it, you know, there could be a nuclear meltdown, or there could be increases of cancer, gets reduced. So once people notice the benefit, they tend to reduce the perceived risk, suggesting then that this is not merely correlational, but rather that it is related to the affect. And the same is true when it comes to the negative. Okay, I think we need a little bit of a break or a summary here. And so let's switch it to a slightly different question, which is the one of probabilities. Let's say that, how concerned would you be if there's a 57% of a terrorist attack? You probably would say very, or maybe not, but let's say that you say very. Now imagine that instead of asking you that, I ask you, how concerned would you be of a 3% of a terrorist attack without having asking you before about 57? If you see them side by side, you obviously are going to be less concerned with 3% than 57. But if you ask people, how concerned would you be of a terrorist attack that has a 3% chance, people say very. So people are, and by people I mean all of us, by the way, okay? We are people too. we fall trap of these things too. We are very insensitive to probabilities. So if I tell you that there is a vaccine that will completely protect you against a disease, then you like that very much. If it tells you that it will be that there's still a 2% chance, you don't like it so well. If I now tell you that there is a vaccine that protects you against one variant of the virus, but not the other, you like that more than if I tell you that there is a vaccine that protects you for half of one variant and half of the other. So we're not really good at integrating risk, emotions, and probabilities. That is the bottom line. And none of us are, but at least we, because we are doing this fabulous workshop, hopefully gain some amount of metacognitive knowledge or insight or reflection that we make these mistakes. And so we can do things to try to overcome it. So what I want to do next is another activity. And here what I want is for you to go into your groups and go to the next question. I'm not gonna read it to you. Make sure to go to your group, and it's a question about trees, okay? And when you do that, you will be giving your answer to the questions here, okay? So do that, please.
Everybody okay?
Marta, I'll quickly have to, unfortunately, join another meeting. Diego, my apologies. I
No,
quite enjoyed.
gotta do what you gotta do, man. I'm glad that you were able to make it half of it.
Thanks so much, Shuba.
Yeah, I'll be back in like half an hour.
Whatever works. I think I might be right around where our break is, but that's okay. Next talk.
Yeah, next.
All right, thanks.
Thanks again.
We have till 1:30, is that correct,
Yeah.
Martha? Or 1:30?
Mhm. Now I have, just since I have you here, real quick, I do have your discussion questions, that we can use. I have them just kind of in a Google slide so people can do it in breakout rooms if you'd like to, and they can think about that, or we can do something else too.
Are those for these 15 minutes for this hour period, or are
For
they...
that 20 minutes, that's the 20-minute discussion portion?
Yeah, so what I suggest that we do is we let them see if there is any questions. We open it, and if there are no questions, then they can do that. But they might have questions.
That's how we've been using them. Yeah, yeah, as just to back up in case there's nothing that comes up. Absolutely. Yeah. So some cases we've not used them at all. In some cases we've spent all our time there. So it just gives us some opportunity for discussion.
That's good. I'm gonna bring them back.
Sounds good.
Okay, so one of the groups had a question that asked if the height of tallest redwood is more or less than 1,200 feet. Now, if you come from anywhere but the United States, you might be confused with feet, but that is the metric that, you know, they use in the United States for some reason. Burned. But in any case, you had to answer yes or no, and then you had to estimate it. The other group, however, had the same question, except that the answer, what they had to decide is whether it was more or less than 180 feet. And what usually happens when I'm able to collect data from the students in my class, we didn't do that today, is that the people who get the high anchor, who were asked whether it's more or less than 1,200, give a larger number than the people who get the low anchor. And this is called the anchoring and adjustment heuristic. We already know what a heuristic is. It's a shortcut, a mental shortcut. You are anchoring with a given number, either a high or low, and then you adjust. You say, well, no, 180 is too small. It must be more than that, but you fail to adjust enough. By the way, next time that you go to buy a car, you will see the sticker price, and you will say, yeah, I know that's overpriced. I'm not gonna be fooled for that. We're all fooled for that. That's how it works. That's the anchor and adjustment heuristic. There are other studies that have been done. For example, how much you'll be willing to make of an annual contribution to, say, Pacific Coast seabirds from offshore oil spills. With no anchor, people might say $64. With a $5 anchor, 20, and with a $400 anchor, 143. So these are pretty large effects, right? So that we're all familiar as being targets of marketing campaigns of these things. But remember, you can use these things also for good, not just for profit. And you should actually, I think you should. And that's the data in case you were wondering. Okay. Let's leave our heuristics behind. We talked about all of them, well, not all of them, but at least the 4 top. Right? We talked about availability heuristic with Europe. We talked about the anchor. We talked about the affect. Oh, we didn't talk about representativeness heuristic, so you'll have to invite me again next year or something. But let's go to something else now. And that is, who doesn't believe in global warming? And I guess you can ask this question in different intonations, like, who doesn't believe in global? You can, but here I'm asking it kind of factually. That is, what is the relation between science knowledge and climate change denial? This is work done by Dan Kahan at Yale University. And he compared liberal Democrats as well as conservative Republicans. In this question, there's a solid evidence of recent global warming due mostly to human activities such as burning fossil fuels. Do you agree or disagree? And the interesting thing here is that he and his group, they also took some measures of science intelligence, of science knowledge. And maybe I'll ask you your intuitions instead of sending you to a group. Maybe a volunteer, somebody who doesn't know the results of these, can tell me how you think this data is gonna come up. Notice that we have really two variables. We have liberal Democrats versus conservative Republicans, and then we have amount of scientific knowledge. So would somebody like to volunteer a guess? You can't be wrong in the sense that I'm asking you to guess of how the data would look like. I think half of the results you probably cannot get wrong, but how about maybe somebody told me that somebody is from England. So whoever is from England, can he or she volunteer an answer here?
I think Leighton had to step out briefly for another meeting. Yeah, so he's off the hook.
How about like maybe Jennifer or Sean or Sophia?
I think most of what I hear about every time I watch CNN is that Republicans, a high percentage of them, are either not aware or blissfully unaware about global warming and the potential disruption it poses to our future generations.
Great. I mean, not great, horrible, but correct.
Yeah.
And I conveniently put the elephant, which is the Republican icon, here in lower for probabilities of agree, and the donkey, which is the Democrat, higher. So Sean is absolutely right on that dimension. Now we need to talk about this other dimension, which is knowledge of science. Would anybody, maybe Alex or Cooper or Maxton, would like to guess what will happen with that variable?
I think that in both parties, as knowledge of science goes up, the belief that there's solid evidence in global warming will go up too.
Okay, that seems a really compelling intuition to me. And as you probably already realized, the theme of this talk is, oh fuck, our intuitions are so often so wrong.
Oh no.
No, but hey, listen, that is the only intuition that you should have. I mean, anything else would be crazy. But this is the crazy. So you have 2,000 participants, so this is not nothing. This is a well-powered study. I mean, psychology has a history of having grossly underpowered studies, but this one is not one of them. And you find this interesting pattern where what you have is the more scientific knowledge, the more polarized. So you would think, I would have thought exactly like it was said, that this red line would go up. I mean, it would be lower than for the Democrats, but that it would go up. No, it goes down. What this suggests is that it's not what they suggest is that the solution, at least with this population, is not education. So it's not that it's not like you didn't understand the problem and now that you understand it, you got it. It's not that you thought that going from 20 to 50 miles per gallon would save you more, but then I show you the math and say, okay, now I get it. No, it's more, and this is Dan Kahn's argument, and I find it compelling, but I should, as a disclaimer, say that there are other researchers who hold the opposite view. It is perceived as a signal of group membership. So this is part of my tribe. What do you mean you live in Philadelphia and you don't root for the 76ers? What the fuck is wrong with you? Of course, if you are from Philadelphia, you ought to root for the Sixers. Even if they have Ben Simmons, you root for the Sixers because it's your team. Now, I'm choosing sports because sports, they don't matter, right? But the argument here is that topics, when they become culturally polarized, they become signals of group membership. The corollary of this is that the best ambassador to change hearts and minds are members of the tribe. So we listen to the members of our own tribe, and so do others. So if you want to be effective at convincing conservative Republicans that global warming is true, then having that host of beliefs in the other domains, then, so for example, if you happen to be a racist, xenophobe, white supremacist who just by the lack of the diet also believes in global warming, we need you, if that makes sense. Now, the official disclaimer, this is not to say that every conservative Republican is a racist, xenophobe, white supremacist, just to say that they voted for one who endorses that view. I think that's a fact and not an opinion. Here is an interesting thing that I'll say, that it seems that scientific curiosity is something that might protect us more than scientific knowledge. So if you are curious about things, people who are curious about how the world works are more inclined to read the story with a title that argues against your position. So let's say that you have a strong position that there is a gender gap in the payment of women, which there is, that women get paid 74 cents for every dollar that a man gets paid in America. And now you are presented with two different stories, one that is titled something like "New evidence suggests that the gap is less than previously thought," and another one that confirms the idea. Scientific curiosity will make you more inclined to choose the one that challenges your beliefs. And that is a good tip for all of us. Always try to run the counter-argument for yourself. It doesn't mean that you have to buy it, but try to run the counter-argument. Okay, we're running out of time. So let me see if I have time for one more thing or not. And if so, what that thing would be. Yeah, I'll just tell you this last one. This is an old study, it's an interesting study. These were people in Arizona State University, and they were working with the Department of Interior and the National Park Service because they have this problem in the petrified forest that people would steal pieces of rock, they'll take them as souvenirs. And obviously that's the problem. And 1.5 of the month, the researchers put a sign that says, many past visitors have removed the petrified wood from the park, changing the state of the petrified forest. Please don't remove petrified wood in the park. The other 2 weeks, they changed the message to be, the vast majority of past visitors have left the petrified wood in the park, preserving the natural state. Please leave petrified wood in the park. And it turns out that the first message basically gives the idea to people who haven't even thought about taking, that maybe they can take it, and it almost gives them some license to do so, because everybody's doing this, and I'm gonna be the idiot who doesn't take a souvenir. I mean, everybody's taking it sooner or later. So it turns out that the message in the bottom is more effective than the message in the top. And with that, I'll stop. There is much more. Thanks for being an awesome audience. And if you are ever more interested in judgment and decision making, as I said, there is a lot at Penn and at Wharton, but I'm also always happy to entertain ideas for research, or just have a nice conversation, or a virtual coffee. So with that, I'll stop. I believe that now we have some time for discussion and conversations. I have some discussion questions prepared that we can use, but I think it might make sense now to open it to the room for you to ask any questions you might have of anything, including how Argentina finally won the America Cup last month, last week. So I'll shut up now and see if you have any questions for me or for the rest of your classmates.
Go ahead again. If you'd like to unmute yourself, feel free to do so. Or if you'd like, you can put your question in the chat. You can message it to me if you don't want to speak. That's all fine. And I'll ask it on your behalf, or you can just go ahead and unmute yourself or raise your hand, whatever. I'll figure it out.
And if you have to go, I also understand. Don't feel like you have to stay, at least not on my behalf.
Yeah, I have one quick question. You kind of touched on it a couple of times regarding the ethics of these framing dilemmas, where you sometimes it's just a marketing strategy, in which case I personally don't think there's a whole lot of morality issues with that. However, the first example I think is a really good one, the whole opt-in, opt-out for organ donations. Clearly that's, you know, a much more personal, and, you know, it affects people on a much more intimate level, I think. I'm just interested to hear your opinion on kind of how do you, these are the whole heuristic thing. I've learned about them a couple times before, and they're really interesting. But it seems like they would just be so ethically charged that I'm curious to hear your thoughts on where the line is, essentially.
Yes, I think that's an excellent question, and it's an important one that could be a whole hour of talk, but we don't have an hour, so let me tell you what I think. First, there's always a default. So when you need to decide where to put the food in the cafeteria, you can decide to put the apples next to the counter, which will increase the amount of apples, or you can decide to put the candy. But you're gonna have to put something. So there's always a default. And then the question becomes how and who decides to set the default? And I think it's a very important question. I can tell you that one way that one can try to solve that question is by asking people what they think. So there is some research suggesting, and I believe I have a slide for this. Let me see if I have it. Oh yeah, here we go. And I'm not saying that you asked the question correctly, and I think that critics have a point when they say that we should take careful consideration to whether this is mind manipulation. When you ask people, how do you feel about these notches or these defaults? People approve if they perceive the goal as legitimate. So a concrete example is if you show a message in your cigarette package that has this very graphic, somewhat disturbing to be honest, image of dental decay, people, that is much more effective than just putting the words. But Maxon raises the question, is that okay? I mean, and when you ask people, people say, well, if it is for a goal that I deem legitimate, then yes. Then of course that raises yet another level of question, is like which goals are deemed legitimate, and I think these are very important things of who decides. The other thing that I'll say here is that when it comes to the choice architecture and many of the notches, another property of notches is that they are easy to override. So you can get the apple that is at eye level, but you can also, if you really want that Snicker bar, go a little bit higher and grab it there. And to the extent that that is a decision that you as an individual deem is very important, then the burden in choosing is not large. Now, the counter-argument is, well, but you told us compellingly that people go around their lives making important decisions without thinking very much. And so I think that's the best that I can do. I'd say that I think they are, yeah, I think I told you everything I know about it, but it's a really good question. And I think maybe next year you guys should invite a philosopher or two to discuss it. It's an important point. Do you have any follow-up thoughts on that, Maxon, or somebody else?
Yeah, I agree. I struggle a bit, and I'm maybe not as well educated as I need to be on ethics and stuff like that, just in social terms. But yeah, who decides these things? Is it just a majority vote? Stuff like that. It's an interesting topic. I guess not a follow-up question, but just an observation.
I should point out that there is this interesting study looking at the rate of returns of library books by different disciplines. And it turns out that professors of ethics are one of the worst offenders at not returning books to the library, which I thought it was an ingenious way of getting at some actual data of whether spending your life studying the topic of ethics really enhances your ethical behavior or not. Yeah, I think that's interesting. I maybe on the same theme, and I think it relates a little bit to what Maxon was saying, but broader. there is this famous classic study where they get seminary students, so people who are studying to be priests, and they have to go across campus to deliver a speech on the Good Samaritan parable of helping somebody. And half of the participants, remind you, these are people who are starting to become priests, were given a very short amount of time to go from one end of the campus to the other. It's like, this is really time sensitive. The other ones were given plenty of time. And of course, in the way, because this is the 70s when social psychologists were like groovy and doing all these cool studies, they put a person pretending to have twisted an ankle and being in pain and I really need help. And the finding was that really the one thing that matters is not whether you are starting to be a priest or even if you're getting ready to talk about the virtues of helping, but rather how much in a hurry you were. That is how the situation helps. We tend to think strongly and incorrectly that people's behavior is driven by the internal dispositions, when in reality there is a lot of evidence suggesting that much of the behavior is driven by these contextual situational factors. This is called the fundamental attribution error, is one of the names. And that, I think, that has some lessons, right, for the things that we've been talking about. The way that you probably solve global warming is by creating, from a political standpoint, from a government standpoint, the structure that nudges or guide people in one path rather than the other, either by giving them rebates for solar panels or by letting them compete to see who in the neighborhood can live with less amount of carbon emissions or whatever. I didn't know I was going to be talking about that study, but it's a good study. Any other thoughts or questions or comments?
I think for me, I guess I'm also interested in, you being an expert in studying these kinds of sort of situational things and making decisions and what drives people to decide the things that they do. I'm just interested in sort of how you implement these things yourself when it comes to, I don't know, making decisions. So are you particularly effective at buying cars? I mean, what do you do when you go to buy a car and you see the sticker price? And what's your next step in that situation working with the car salespeople?
I would like to think that I'm better than average, but when you ask people, everybody thinks that they're better than average. I think that to some extent, let's put an analogy or a metaphor. I'm not very good at getting up in the morning, but I know how to set an alarm. And so and I'm not very good at staying away from the ice cream when it's in the fridge, but I know not to buy it. When I choose no, actually, often I have conflicting levels of desire, right? I desire the ice cream and I desire not to desire the ice cream. So one thing that I try to do is, and that I try to teach my students is, first, to make a decision of whether this matters or doesn't matter. So what is the magnitude of it? I've been married for 20 years, and I have learned that some things, when you're a professor and you are financially stable and things like that, some things are easier. It's like, if it's less than $100, let's not even argue about it. Just do it. If it is and by the way, my wife is great and we are very well aligned when it comes to financial matters. So it's not like this a problem, and that's a history informs too, right? But So first is this something, what is the magnitude of this? Is this important or not important? That's the first thing. And if it's not important, then I pay less attention to it, and I'm okay. And then I try to use external helpers, like I said, like the clock, and also internal tricks, right? So look at the counterfactual. What if I don't do this? What happens if I don't do this? Or what is the worst that can happen? I think that those things kind of help me, so those are some of the things I do. At the same time, I'm pretty bad at implementing. That's yet another level, right? So one is the level where you make a mistake. You think you want, you don't realize that you are paying too much for something or so forth. There's another level, which is the one of implementing things. So there is one thing about I want to exercise, and another thing is to motivate yourself to exercise. I want to write my papers, but I procrastinate. So I'm a procrastinator. And so when it comes to implementing, I personally haven't found the tricks, or I haven't buy into the tricks that would help me implement better. So we know that there's some things. Asking people to unpack helps. So if you don't want to be late, then you unpack the task. So we tend to greatly overestimate how quickly we're going to work on something. Part of that is a function that we don't identify each component of the step. So it's, okay, I'm going to have to work on the figures of the paper, and that's going to take an afternoon. And then I'm going to have to work on the references, and that's going to be another day, just of stupid references, right, or whatever. Once you enumerate, there is this beautifully titled paper, if you don't want to be late, enumerate. Enumerating the steps that you have to take, it's a good thing. And knowing how. So if you ask people, are you going to vote? That doesn't help them much go to the poll, to go to voting booth. But if you ask them how you're going to do it, when you're going to do it, who's going to take care of the kids when you're doing it, at what time, what location, identifying those things help. But then I think it's an issue of how much you really care. So I know the steps that I need to do to lose weight. I just don't seem to want to do them at the moment. I do want to have done them. So I don't know, this is turning into a therapy session, which is great because you're not going to charge me. I don't think so. You're going to charge me? No. But I don't know if any of that helps. But those are some of the things that I try to live by, with modest success.
Anybody else? Time for like one more question.
So
All right, well, yeah, go ahead.
I'll ask a question if to you guys. Raise your hand, or either electronically or with your real hand, if you have taken a course in judgment and decision making at any point in your career. Raise your hand if you have taken a course in psychology at any point in your career. Okay. Neuroscience. Okay. It's all good. I hadn't taken any course in psychology until I went to grad school. And turned out okay for me. So
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for being here with us and for your awesome insights. I always, you know, I've heard you speak a few times, and every time I come out with something new that I somehow missed or have neglected, or it's some other angle I hadn't thought of. So I know that this is something that we can take with us moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thanks for being so kind. I will clean up a little bit the slides and send them to Marta to make it available. Feel free to use them. And as I said, if at any point you have any questions, don't hesitate, drop me an email and I'll be happy to take them. And thank you.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right, we are now butting up against our 40-minute break. As you are off on your break, please don't forget that you can take that tiny opportunity to go get your entry for your CSSM swag on Twitter. Remember, you can tell us how you are a CSSM sustainability ambassador. That's the hashtag. And don't forget to tag others, and that will get you another entry into the raffle drawing. And with that, we will see you at 2:30 for our next talk.
Okay, see you then. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.